Okay, welcome everyone to Planning Commission. Thank you for coming. I would entertain an approval of the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Karen, second by Roland. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, declaration of conflict of interest.
None.
None.
I own obviously commercial buildings, but I don't know that it's a direct conflict as per our conversations earlier. Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, public comments. I was going to bring up, and I don't know what the commission feels, but in the previous meetings, I guess I feel like they wanted the public comments to be after the
Business?
business.
Conversation.
But I don't know, I kind of feel like, it'd probably be better for them to be heard before we make a decision, but I guess, I don't know what your
Could we
thoughts are.
add
I mean, maybe
10
just
minutes
for
to
future.
after? Or like,
Are we making a decision on anything tonight?
Well, yeah, there's 3 discussions of new business, yes.
But are we voting on, are we actually submitting anything to the city council?
we could.
If we decide. If we decide,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring it up. I mean, the agenda, we just approved the agenda the way it is. I just wanted more for future discussion if we want to adjust future agendas to allow for additional comment later in the period or not.
So for me, I think it comes down to if people understand the way the forum works and that they need to comment now, we should continue that way. If we feel like we have time, our discussions do go quite long, and sometimes we feel like we don't have time at the end.
Right.
And that could just make it longer.
Sure.
However, sometimes we need things introduced before we are,
Public comment.
right. And so maybe it's even a good idea for Jeff to introduce the things that we are going to talk about before the public comment.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I really liked how we did it with the inland port, that we had them kind of teach us about it first, and then we did the public comment. I think that's what, at least from the conference that we went to, that's what a lot of other planning commissions and city councils do, is depending on if it's like a new item and we're just learning about it, a new item, or if it's something that we've discussed before. Obviously, all of these have been brought to
Talked
us
about them
before.
multiple times,
So I
yeah.
think it'd be fine to do the public comment now and then.
Okay.
If I may.
Sure, please.
There's a difference, I don't, maybe this is splitting hairs, but I want to draw a distinction between an item that's on the agenda as a public hearing and an item that is just on the agenda for general discussion.
Sure.
In that, items that are on here as administrative items are not dependent on receiving public comment, and they're not required to have a public hearing associated with them. Things like rezone applications are legislative items, and you're making a recommendation to the city council. So those items would require a public hearing, and the public has the opportunity and the requirement to be heard prior to you taking action on those items. So I just wanted to draw that distinction between administrative and legislative items. It's completely up to the discretion of the Planning Commission on administrative items if you want to take public comment on those items, but you don't have to. That's just completely up to you. For legislative items, there is no option. You have to take that public comment. And typically what I've seen is you will introduce the item, and then you'll have staff give an explanation of what is being considered. And then you would hold a public hearing after any discussion that you have with staff. And then you bring it back after you close the public hearing, and then have discussion among the planning commissioners and additional questions for staff or the applicant, if there are any, and then take action on the item. That's for legislative items. For administrative items, again, you don't have to listen to anyone or anything. It's just you make a decision based strictly on what's in the code already.
Sure. Well, and I realize we don't have to. I was more just trying to introduce the conversation to make sure that we've listened to everybody's concerns prior to just sounding like we're not. You know what I'm saying?
So in line with what Andrew was observing with today is because these are pretty much
ongoing discussions that we've had. My plan with newer items was to introduce what I was gonna call a workshop, and I would break it up where you would see
Discussion previously.
a workshop of just discussion of this item, where that would be where I would even say introduction of this item, where I'll give a presentation or present what's going on, and then we would have the public hearing on it, or public commenting.
Public
whenever we
comment.
want to.
Okay,
And then we would go down into the new business, which would be discussion and consideration, which would take it back to you guys to openly, continue the dialogue.
perfect. Yeah, I think that's ideal. Okay, perfect. We will open the public comment period now. If anyone wants to speak on any of these items or other items, come up to the podium, state your name. You've got 3 minutes. Rollins going to time. Ready, set, go.
Not an hour. Stop it.
Hi, my name's Christine Epling. Over the past month, I have studied the city land use plan and the principles of a plan-based development. I've also been reading the ground rules, your handbook to Utah's land use by Greg McCall, a very good book. As my role, it states in that book that my role as a resident is to offer contrasting perspectives, provide community insight, and speak up when issues affect the integrity of our community. So tonight I'm here to offer some perspectives that might have been overlooked regarding the item B on the agenda. I want to be clear, I'm not opposed to the city's long-term vision of this area eventually becoming an urban hub, if and when the infrastructure is in place, such as a freeway off-ramp and other supporting services. But we are not there yet. The area in question is not even mapped on the current land use plan. Today it's surrounded by agricultural land, 1 to 2 acre rural lots, and open space. Even if future adjacent zoning, it recommends single-family houses on moderate lots around 12,000 square feet, not dense multifamily units. So my concern is not about the future vision, it's about the timing. Introducing high-density new housing in an area that is disconnected from services, schools, and transits would be premature. It would conflict with the plan's own guidance to build in a way that is complementary to the existing look and feel of the area. I also think we need to pay close attention to balance. With 953 single-family houses and 1,238 multifamily units already approved, the city growth is already tipping towards higher density. But the necessity infrastructure hasn't caught up, especially not on Iowa Spring. We've already seen the consequences of letting development get ahead of infrastructure, like on 1000 North, where 71 homes were approved without sidewalks and safe road access for school children. Iowa Spring is even busier and far less prepared. The challenge isn't limited to that corridor. The city as a whole is showing signs of strain. Schools are over capacity. At the most recent city council meeting, the police chief stated clearly that the department is already operating at full capacity and cautioned that additional growth would stretch the resources. The same concerns apply to our fire department, which is already under pressure. All of these realities must be considered carefully when approving zoning changes. Growth without adequate support system puts real families at risk. I understand the need for affordable housing. I know that developers can help with impact fees. High-density development here would stretch our infrastructure, not strengthen it. More people means more pressure, more roads, police, parks, and schools, but not necessarily more income for the city. Developers may help cover the costs, but it's rarely enough to keep up. Development should not drive infrastructure. Infrastructure should guide development. Placing dense housing on the outskirts, detached from the community core, without safe roads or parks, don't serve the families or the city well. It just creates more long-term strain. I respectfully ask the committee to align with the city's plan, not just the vision, but not just in vision, but in readiness. Zone this area in a way that fits the present landscape, supports a balanced growth to growth, and sets up for success when the time is truly right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Wood. I am also concerned about item number 2, the annexation and the zoning of that property. I live out there, I was grown out there. Obviously, it's a rural area, and I think it's important to note that we're not opposed to growth out there. We're not opposed to outsiders. We feel like outsiders have enriched, like the Freeman Farms neighborhood has enriched our community and our neighborhood, but it's the type of growth that we're opposed to. Like Christine said, they're 1 acre to 2 acre larger lots, agriculture land, and that's what fits out in that area. But I think my main concern is that the last few planning and zoning meetings, I've heard a lot of talk about efficient. What is efficient for our community? And as a social worker and a sociologist, that's my degrees, I learned early on that we should, when it's ever it comes to people, we should focus on what is effective over what is efficient. And I think when we're looking at our schools right now, we're taking a track that is not effective for our community. We're doing what's efficient, and it's causing a lot of harm. I was at the school board meeting last month. McKinley and North Park, which feeds the over 2,000 new units that have been recently approved. This is without any of that growth. They already have 16 cubicles, classrooms. They're teaching in hallways, kivas, gymnasiums, without leaving room for PEs to be held in there. So we don't have any schools approved or growth even approved for that, and we're allowing this kind of growth. We value our survey that the city did shows that we value open space, rural character. That was a main priority. I think over 80 to 90% of the residents said. As has been said before, we're concerned about roads, safety, the bus stops in that area. But I think most of all, if you look at the current land use plan and the priorities set on that, it is to preserve the rural agriculture feel of this community, to preserve open space, which out there is important that we do larger lots, that we preserve the agriculture area. I feel passionate that we have a responsibility to bring people in that will enrich and grow our community, but especially to the people that are already there, that have built those areas, that have built the community, that we preserve the values that not only those values of agriculture and our rural heritage are respected, protected, but preserved, and that we develop with a preservation mindset.
I'm Jamie Poppleton, Tremonton. I would like to say thank you for allowing this video to be YouTubed, but I just received a message that said all they're seeing is the screen. Can we maybe get that fixed somehow? They can hear, but. I got Zoom on as well, so it's kind of hard. Okay, I just wasn't sure, but I just wanted to reach out and say thank you. There's a lot of people that are interested in this aspect of it, and being able to see it right along with the council meetings is a good thing, so thank you for that.
My name is Danielle Barfus. I'm not as eloquent as the previous three, but I do have a couple questions. I hope this is the right place to ask those questions. So the LB Land Holdings is that new ground on Iowa String that's going to be developed, I'm assuming, right? Okay. I'm just curious, are the lots or the homes going to be facing Iowa String, because that'll affect the flow of traffic through there? Is that speed limit there going to be knocked down to 25 miles per hour? Are the outlets going to be going to the Rocket Road part? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, if you could answer that for me, because it's already a pain in the butt trying to get into Tremont, and now with Tremont Street at 25 miles per hour. The Harvest Village development down here, I've noticed they're parking on the gravel on the Rocket Road part. Is that something that the city handles? Is that something that's gonna be like a common thing now? Because we already face enough issues trying to see through that hill when cars come up and they're speeding. And now I already had to call Sierra Homes and ask them to move their sign back so I could make a turn because it was blocking the vision of the road. Those were just some questions I had. I know there's going to be growth in Tremont, and I'd like to reiterate, infrastructure is so key, and I feel like we're missing out on that. Are we taking into consideration all these things when we're planning the development? I don't feel like we are. And again, I brought up, I can't remember the councilman's name at the last meeting, but the parking on Tremont Street with the angled parking and the parallel parking, it's a mess. Somebody's gonna get hurt. We've already had one teenager die on the roads here. And I don't want there to be another fatality because it's just getting out of control. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kyle Jepson. I'm an engineer down at Hill Air Force Base. I just wanted to come tonight and say that one of the many reasons I decided to make my home here in Tremont is because of the rural characteristic of the community. I don't want to live in Ogden, Roy, any of those closer communities to Hill Air Force Base. This makes my commute 45 minutes, which I have been told repeatedly by many of my colleagues is a very long commute. Again, I chose that because of the rural characteristic that I want to live in and build my home in. I think there are many others like me who are willing to commute out of the community because of the rural characteristic that is here. Well, to some, I understand that townhomes are not considered high-density housing. In a rural characteristic, they are. And I feel that the most effective zoning for this property that could maintain the rural characteristic of the community is most likely 1 acre lots. And I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
My name's Ben Hunsaker. First of all, I want to apologize because I'm hard of hearing and I don't know which bases have been covered and which ones haven't. I've lived in this area for 90 years, and I don't know how many of you know about the situation with the tile lines and drainage districts in this area. Some of them were put in back in the turn of the century, 1900. Recently, there's a big main line that was put in back in the 60s, which I worked on myself. If those lines are disrupted, there'll be hundreds of acres of farmland that'll be absolutely useless. That's why they put these tile lines in over 100 years ago. I don't know if anybody knows what they're dealing with, but there's a document called the Utah Code, and it deals with tile lines and drainage districts, and it's not that hard to understand. I gave a copy to Lyle Vance some time ago. I don't know if he ever decided to share it with anybody or not, but if you haven't heard of it or seen it, it'd pay you to look at that very earnestly. This is a bigger problem than what you think it might be, and I would appreciate your concern.
Anyone else?
My name's Jamie Crowther. I just have a couple thoughts and maybe pass along for something to think about. I think it was Workforce Services. According to them, I think the major employer in and around Box Elder County, specific Tremont, was manufacturing, which I think that's true when you look at the amount of manufacturing we have with Procter & Gamble, with the new school supply place, Malto Mill. I think manufacturing is a major employer of this area. And so I do think, yeah, you need a supply need for people that are coming in. But it's concerning to me as like a resident too, is that, so, we've got a lot of people coming in and working, finding employment, but it also is like, well, look at our schools too. How many Title I schools do we have in this area? Which are Title I schools reflective of a demographic? Are they reflective of a medium income from a family? I believe that's how it qualifies for Title I. And so I think there kind of needs to be a balance of, support that Title I school. You have people that support that, but can, all the incoming people coming in, is there a possibility to make higher end home availability for bigger lots, which might be bringing a different demographic of people compared to multifamily housing on a smaller acreage? Is there consideration of what type of, who are we drawing to the city? Who are we drawing, which will eventually end up in schools and in employee, so, and be employed here? And is there a place to maybe hold off on multifamily development or so much development, focus on, okay, we've got all these people coming, how are we gonna take care of them? How are we gonna support them with food, with roads? Is downtown Tremont City accommodating to the people that are coming in? Is traffic flow good? I mean, Rocket Road is horrible as far as the road there. Is that in line to get fixed? And if it is, can that be shown with the public, and what's the timeline for that? The place in front of IFA and Twisted Sugar, it's just such a hard in and out, and more people coming into the city are using these roads, right? And so I just wonder if there's consideration of like, okay, we're approving development, we're approving that because we need it. I understand city growth, but are we making it available to all different types of demographic as well, and not just maybe one that would support it? Because it takes both ends, one that receives help and one that gives help, right? And so is there that equal balance of housing availability? Are we drawing in, maybe with bigger acreage sizes, people that we also want to be here as well? So I just think it's a point for thought to think about, as we approve and as we develop, what's the demographic we're bringing in here? What type of people? Where are they working? Where are they commuting? Do we want them to stay here, work, eat, and, recreate? Or are we just making it so they're going to go somewhere else to do that? I'd like to see them come here, stay here, shop here, and support local here. So that's just my thought.
Thank you. Any others?
Hi, I am Kim Detweiler. I've taught at McKinley Elementary, and I now teach at Garland. And I just want to say the impact of apartments, more apartments, more apartments. As a teacher, I totally see the impact of that. Sure, not all apartment livers are, I don't know what the word would be for that, but I'll tell you this, I see more vandalism in my school from McKinley to Garland. Garland is now receiving more vandalism in like bathrooms and everything. In school you have blue, green, yellow, red kids, right? That's how we test them. And McKinley, over there, your classes are half red, half green. We're losing that middle ground. Garland used to be significantly green and blue and a little bit of red. It is now shifting. We are getting more and more lower kids that we are expected to deal with. And a school, to me, should have a community. We can't hardly have community activities because of the quantity of children. No parking, no places to put people. So it's really kind of breaking up this sweet little feel of community you would feel in a school building. And I agree with Mrs. Crowther about, what kind of people do we want to draw? Because apartments, whoever gets to build them gets paid and paid and paid and paid and paid and paid and paid every month, no matter who lives there. So those people aren't going to complain here tonight about not building them. But we who live here, our taxes are going to increase. We are the ones that are going to drive and go and have to just be, victims of the populations that's going to get increased before we increase the structure of supporting those people. Manaway, they don't allow this much growth in just a sweet little amount of time. So I wish we could just, kind of step back, put on the brakes for a minute, and really evaluate what we really could do for the benefit of all of us. So thank you.
My name's Jim Peterson, and I'm not as smart as and articulate as some other views that expressed, but something that's been shared to me from the city council, from Mayor Holmgreen and others, is that we have this pressure to try to do things, or else if we don't, it'll develop within the county and it'll be stuck on us. And that being logic, I think what Brother Hunsaker just shared tonight should put the city on real onus, because these tile lines are a big deal. And you don't approve a plat and put some footings in and do compaction, and life is good. It is not. It has totally interrupted the flow. That alkaline level is not only going to come up in those immediate properties. If we go back, and I'm not smart enough to remember the subdivision that was approved east of Iowa String on about Freedom Farms. Look at the concept of that was approved, it all went in well, until we have a high water mark, which we have in the area. And that workaround, in short term, it was a problem on, I think, 4 homes to go through. But as we're going, that we'll get the utilities in, we'll get the sewer, it'll take care of it, we'll get a pumping station and move it. But I think there needs to be some wisdom in stepping back and truly take into consideration the points Ben Hunsaker raised, along with the other social economic impacts that are happening. And I can appreciate the pressure the developers making and petitioning to get a decision to move ahead. But these are long-term consequences that the city is facing, and that we as residents of the county are coming in as uninvited, indentured servants coming in. We have no right to vote. We have no input into what's going on in the city, yet we're 100% impacted by it. But thank you for your time, your effort, and service, and anyway.
Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? We'll move on to item number 4, approval of minutes, May 13th and May 27th.
Move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
We have a motion by Roland, a second by Karen. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion carries to approve both of them. I assume you were
Yes.
motioning. Okay,
Got to May 13th before it was seconded, but
sure. Okay, both are approved. Moving on, 5, new business, discussion and consideration for new head of planning commission. So I guess at this point, you guys need to nominate somebody to be the chair and the pro temp. Is that kind of how they're supposed to do this?
I don't know if we even have outlined really in our code of what the procedure is for this. I was going to leave it open to the planning commission to discuss and nominate a new chair for the planning commission. I feel we're to the point that members understand the procedures of how planning commission operates well enough to relieve Mike of a position he's been in for a few months.
Yeah, a little while.
So I was just gonna kind of leave it open to you guys to nominate and vote in a new chairperson. Bill, I don't know if you've seen this happen before, if there's guidelines we need to follow. But
No, there's no specific guidelines. Just generally, you would take a nomination and then people would vote on it.
Okay, hearing that, I would
Nominate yourself too, if you wish.
entertain nominations for the new chair of the planning commission.
I would nominate Rollin.
I would second that. Just kidding.
I would nominate,
Are you
I would,
serious?
I would, I would nominate Mark Thompson.
Okay, we have Mark Thompson and Rollin.
Yes, I should ask, is that something you would want to do, Rob?
Are either of you unwilling, I guess? is the
I
question.
can nominate you, but is that something you would be willing to do?
I would be willing, yes.
You're both willing? Okay. Well,
Arm wrestle.
He'd win.
Probably not.
Yeah, I think so.
Nope.
okay, we have 2 nominations. Any more nominations? I guess we can nominate our, well, I guess they can't probably be nominated, our fill-ins, our alternates, because they're technically not here all the time, right?
No, the only time we'll nominate alternates is if a planning commission member is deciding to step away, and then we would choose from the 2 of who would become the new voting member. Where they came in at the same time, it's probably the only time, and then after that, we'd obviously have kind of a senior alternate that's been here longer, and then the new person, and we'd look at kind of rotating it based on experience of going through that direction. But where they came in at the same time, it'd be more of a discussion for the planning commission of who they'd want to nominate out of the alternates.
Perfect. Okay, seeing the nominations, all in favor of Rollin? 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, I guess that means,
You're not going to ask for Mark, huh?
well, all in favor
Can
of
you
Mark.
vote?
I can vote if there's a tie probably, but. So, 3 to 1.
3 to 1.
So the new chair will be officially Rollin. Do we do that now, or we do that at the next meeting?
No, I think I'll put a resolution together to go through the council to.
Oh, 'cause they have to
confirm
approve?
the change.
Okay.
And so then, starting with our planning commission, after the 4th of July, we would see the
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it's good. Get new folks in here, for sure. Okay, moving on, new business, 5B, discussion consideration of LB Land Holdings.
Is there anything new on this?
Yeah, where are we at as far as from the developer side? Has anything changed? Where are we at?
With the smile, there isn't a lot. I discussed with the property owner for LB Land Holdings that they feel it would be hard to develop with the amount of capital improvements that'll have to go in to service this development. They were worried about their ability to positively cash flow anything with less units than the R18 would give them.
Is that mostly because of the lift pump?
And I think too, because they've got to get, they also need to loop both the drinking water and the secondary water from almost the Rocket Road Iowa String intersection over to under the railroad tracks and up to where it is going in the Harvest Acres development. So there's about a mile plus of extra water lines they're gonna have to go in to just make sure that you get the pressure ratings and everything for this area to serve it. So, I mean, the lift station is the primary. I mean, it's a large capital improvement, but the water lines themselves, having to do 2 of them is not a small feat either. So.
What, I know we've had multiple different conversations about infrastructure. Do you feel like that the codes that we have that are, that all of these folks have to abide by are going to be sufficient to improve the infrastructure to, accommodate their respective zones and respective developments? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the water lines in terms of service capacity will be there. Where they're downhill, I'm not worried. I think we'll be able to generally size what the main lines need to be to service this area as it develops out. The biggest variable, and there isn't a crystal ball clear enough to see, is how to you just don't know how big or to balance the lift station out between making it sized enough that is it initially starts up, that it has both the diameter and the pumps in there so that it runs, but it doesn't run too much, while also making that it runs enough that any stored effluent in the wet tanks doesn't go septic, because that's when it becomes poisonous to serve because of the gases that are coming off of the effluent in the bottom. So that's the biggest balancing game, is designing a regional lift station to handle what's causing it to be built in the very first, and then designing it with enough capacity and partial future vaults that it can handle as this area fills out. Having designed two or three of them, it's a lot of iterative, and it's a lot of iteration to get to a point that the city engineer and as the design engineer come to an agreement on what the approach is. I think the key will just be getting enough land around the lift station that if it needed to be upsized or overhauled, we already have the square foot, the area in place to do that maintenance or upsizing without having to do massive renovations to the entire site.
And is that already, I guess, been secured or worked out? Like,
Yeah, so it hasn't been worked out yet, but that Anderson piece in the teal has said that they'll work with us in deeding over whatever size we kind of come up with as we go through it. So they've been very open and willing to work with us as this becomes a little bit more clear of kind of how big of a footprint we need.
I don't know, what question?
I was just gonna say, so what happens, so if you're saying it's not cost effective at a certain level for them to develop, so if we don't push this forward and they can't develop it, what happens?
It's
Just dead land?
Well, I mean, either way, I would recommend that we get some kind of zoning in place so that it has regulations on it, because if we just,
Because right now it doesn't have any.
it doesn't have anything, so
Does that mean they can do anything, or they're waiting for us?
they're waiting for us. Because with the pre-annexation agreement, it said that they'd have to have that some of this would have to be outlined and done prior to any kind of development activities going on. So we're waiting to get a recommendation from the planning commission before we can start moving things along. If your recommendation is, less zoning or less dense zoning, then I feel like it'll really change either not what's developed out there in a sense of the product types that might come out, but what the financial relationship is between the city and the developer going forward, or what extra amenities we could maybe ask of them, and what the city may have to help pay for.
So it wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the density was somewhat required or involved in order to be able to hook up the Freeman Farms folks?
Correct.
Because
So
of the costs and everything to be able to do that, is that, if, I guess from my, I don't understand, but is the city allowing septic systems if we did 1 acre zoning, or no?
So yes and no. Where the sewer isn't nearby or available, so an extremely specific example is if you go out along 1000 North out towards the Bear River, it's so like out where the canal washed out last spring.
Oh, yeah.
Out in that direction, the city doesn't have sewer. I mean, the sewer's barely past the crossroads light.
Right.
So any development up there, especially if you're just talking about like,
Onesie,
a
twosie.
lot or two, that's where we permit septic to go in, because there's no way. But where they're talking about doing, 70 plus acres of development, that we would look at still having to pull the sewer in. It just changes either if the city has to pay for more of, and this is all stuff that we would negotiate as part of the development agreement, but it would change either how much the city has to help on some of the offsite improvements, if we need to reimburse more, if there's more cost sharing. I mean, I feel like it's cost effective that if the developer's out there doing this and designing all of it, that you get one contractor and one set of plans and make it all work a little bit easier. But I think it would change to the fact that, I mean, one thing we've been working for is, you know, having it be a regional lift station along Iowa String so the city doesn't have to have multiple out there. But I mean, the developer's only responsible really for himself and meeting what he has to in the state. You know, so anything above, if the city asks or negotiates anything above what the developer needs to meet the code, that's where we have to start negotiating, and that's what we've normally put into development agreements to help with that. This zoning and these densities have been part of what's been going on for about a year and a half now, trying to work through bringing the utilities to existing residents, while also making it generally economical for the city to have this area as part of its service district.
How big is R18?
8,000 square foot lots.
8,000 square foot lots, so it would be,
It's the same size as Chavez Estates.
That's what I was trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my
R18
neighborhood,
is Chavez
That's your
Estates.
neighborhood.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
and like,
And
and
Ring.
if they have the,
well, and like most of the old part of downtown here is R18.
right, so that's not, I don't feel like that's, I mean, I've got plenty of room in my yard, right? And we have, and so in Chadas, they ended up building those townhouses right next to like the Caldwell Banker. Does that make sense? Is that kind of a similar layout that this developer is thinking of, like having like mostly pretty normal size houses and normal size lots, and then maybe a couple, I mean, there's
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 townhouses on that side, and then there's a couple duplexes on the other side that are like fill-ins? Is that kind of what they're looking at, or is it more of like the visionary, like here's your whole line of
No, it's,
townhouses?
what the developers expressed is, and this is a direction that not just the city, but the state, at the state level is being pushed to, is what's more considered a conservation subdivision. And so looking at how many units per acre you have, you end up seeing, okay, obviously townhomes are gonna be more dense than the lots, apartments are gonna be more dense than townhomes. You only get so many total units to play with, and the approach now in really through the whole state is to try and keep those units together to reduce construction costs, but also to promote open space conservation, that you can have trails and you can have park amenities. And I don't mean parks as in like Stevens Park where you're gonna have T-balls and programs, but I mean like walking trails and spaces around that you know, preserve and that not everything's subdivided as we've traditionally seen through development standards. And so you would be correct. I mean, you're correct. The ability to bring in not just like the fact that under R18 you pretty much would get boxed lots that are like, here's your 8,000 square feet, here's your next 8,000. The PUD and the conservation approach says, okay, well, we're gonna try to cluster up some much larger lots, some half acre or acre lots, and use that in spots where it makes sense. But you know, next to a cement plant and next to Iowa String, those might not be the places where people want to have backyards. And to address one concern, we will look at not having driveway accesses onto roads of that size when you do under developed city standards. And so you're looking then at multi-family, kind of like with Archibald Estates up by the hospital, all those townhomes, they still access their cars off of the side roads. Yeah, their front road, their front door is 1,000 north, and it is what it is. But that I feel like that is a group and a demographic that accepts those kind of living conditions a lot better than, you know, having your backyard up against.
You don't want to have your pasture with the cement stuff right there. A lot of people.
When my wife and I were looking to move from Idaho down to We ended up in Utah County, but there was a house down in Saratoga Springs we were looking at, and on the MLS it looked amazing, and we get there and the backyard was Redwood Road. And like, we got out of the car and I was like, oh, this is one of the noisiest houses I've ever been. And like, the landscaping will eventually grow up, but like, it's a newer build, you can still see the road, and I'm like, that is Redwood freaking Road. Like, that's not a fun spot if you're trying to have a backyard with space with kids. So we would look at putting multifamily and putting a little bit extra density along environments where maybe it doesn't make as much sense to have the single family, and then doing a variety of lot sizes from like what Envision Estates is doing over by the old hospital and those, 4,000 to 5,000 square foot starter home styles into, half acre plus lot sizes. But I will say this, and it's the most depressing fact I have right now for housing economics in Utah, but quarter acre lots in Harriman that in a subdivision I designed 6 years ago are averaging 1.2 million. So that's what's
In Harriman.
in Harriman. Like, I'm not talking the avenues, I'm not talking like, oh, what a view, I'm meaning
Well, but Harriman doesn't have great infrastructure either, and that's what, I mean, I.
designed that.
I'm just gonna say it. And I think that your talking points are true in a lot of ways, but I think that we've got to remember that Box Elder County is, like, I love it when we compare ourselves to the state. However, we are the most not part of the state. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have all come here because we don't really love how Salt Lake County is being run, right? And so.
But what if we never let you come here?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like,
Well, that's
if, but I want to keep what we have, correct, right?
So we let everybody, we let you and all
Well,
the
yeah,
other
but what
people
I
in and
live
stop
on,
it?
no, but what I live on is a bigger lot, correct? Well, I mean, I'm just saying, what these people live on and what I live on is what I always wanted. It was my dream. This is my American dream, right? And what they're saying is that we welcome other people. We love the idea of this high density housing, but we've got a chicken and an egg problem with our infrastructure. And I've heard people say that they were promised things from the city as far as like what's up on Radio Hill with how the kids are gonna get to school. And they were told that certain things would happen, and I don't know if they were in writing or not, because I haven't dug on that, and it hasn't happened. So I know I don't have the ability to necessarily change everything from my level. But what I'd like to do is at least listen to the people that are saying zoning is the first part of it, and I don't know where it's gonna go. And if I have a say in the zoning, and that makes me feel like I can have some sort of control in the infrastructure and the process, then I want to say something now. Now, we've told everybody here that they still need to be in on it on the next level. For whatever we approve, they know they're in this for the long haul now, because they live there. So what can we do to guarantee and not guarantee, or at least put in writing? It's kind of like one of those bills that you have in Congress. Like, you have all these parts of the bill, and we're trying to push the whole bill through. And I just really like some parts of it, and I don't like all of it. But what can I do to make sure that that those parts that I like are the parts that stand out, and make sure that they happen, i.e. the sewer system, and that the city all of a sudden isn't responsible for whatever this gentleman was telling us that we may be in for, that we have no idea. And I know those studies cost money, like, I get that. But if we're really listening, that's what they're asking of us, is to say, this zoning matters because everything else comes after it. And so what can we do to make sure that that looks like what we all want? And I still understand where we're coming from as the developer. Like, if it's not cost effective, that's capitalism. Like, unfortunately,
Well, and if, don't they own this property?
Right, they own it.
Someone bought this property to do
build.
whatever they want,
Correct.
right? Like,
And
that's
we-
America, right? Like, that is what we, like, believe in.
Right, and we've
so
got-
we want to be able to let them build what they want.
Correct.
Not being annexed in the city.
Please, please. We got to talk. This isn't
And
like a
so-
public.
And so, like, we should let them
Develop it.
Develop it, right?
Correct.
That, like, it is their property that they own.
And when they bought it, what was their idea? Did they automatically assume that this was going to happen and everything was going to go okay? Probably, right? And we have a responsibility for what we've already talked to this developer about as far as what we've offered as a city and a community, right? And
What do you?
well, I'm just saying that they're going to do things for us as far as infrastructure and plans, right?
Right.
That we actually need and people that already live here could benefit from. That's big, and that's the part I love.
Well, a minute ago, you were saying something about it, the infrastructure wasn't sufficient.
Well, I'm talking about the roads being widened. I'm talking about when people are talking about everything being really accessible as far as like how bad the traffic is and all of that stuff. I would assume that's not part of what we're asking the developer to change.
Well, that's why I asked earlier, because so the codes are the codes. Everybody has to align to the codes. And so if the development triggers anything that isn't infrastructure sufficient, then the DRC basically makes them improve the road, widen
Okay.
it, whatever it is. So
So then it's not our like responsibility to worry about that, right? Like,
not generally, because we can't change it at this level. I mean,
Right.
that's why I asked it earlier, like, so the codes are in place so that you can't treat someone differently if you don't like them or you do like them. I mean, the codes are the codes, and, you know, they have to have, what?
Yeah, they're uniform.
Yeah, and so they're designed to basically say, okay, if you do this, then you have to do this. And that's really part of the real problem in my mind is the reason why the 1 acre lots don't work is because our codes are so restrictive. We have to put these huge roads in that are massive with sidewalks and curb gutter and storm drainage, and the county doesn't really require that as much. They have a narrower road, and, you know, that's where we talked about this years ago. It's like, what do we want and what do we want, you know, long term, where do we want this to be? But ultimately, this dirt is so close to the city, and the city is kind of built out in the internal sites, and that's why it's stretching to the external pieces. What do we want this, when this becomes the middle of the city someday, what do we want it to be, and what roads do we need to build now to make sure that's accommodated? You know what I mean? And I don't know, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the health department, I guess, has requested or asked the city to try to help solve the Freedom Farms failing septics. Is that part of the situation?
Well, it was when the lower 30 acres was brought into consideration, and knowing that, you know, most of that stuff runs downhill. It was a consideration I asked the developer to consider, because the lift station they put downstream of this can easily service this subdivision, and with how our soils are, and with how I mean, guys, our soils are so bad that the region had to go in and put drainage tiles in. Like, this is not soil that's ever absorbed anything. It helpfully relocates water. And I don't mean that through going through the dirt, I mean going over the dirt until it finds a lower spot. And so is we're sitting in, is a city going, okay, we're gonna have a lift station down there. What can we do to get these existing septic tanks to go away, because they're not something the city wants to have to deal with? I mean, in the past, 10 years, we've already had a few wet springs where there's groundwater issues, where septic tanks don't flush anymore. So what can we do if there's already a lift station going down here to mitigate the amount of you know, general public health risks that are in the area? So that's when the discussion came in with them about a year ago of saying, you know, what can we do? We'd like to have, we had an open discussion with most of the Freeman Farm residents to ask what it would, what their concerns would be about being on city utilities, because they, you know, there's one guy in there that owns 2 lots, and when he found out that the city might be, you know, we're trying to bring infrastructure out there, he said, well, I'm not gonna build anything, I'm gonna wait for the utilities to come in so I can get a house that flushes. And so that was what the discussion was, is if the city's gonna start putting utilities and infrastructure down that road because a developer is willing to take on the risk and the financial burden, let's solve some other problems while we're out there, because mobilization fees are not fun to pay for when you go send things out to bid.
Well, and I guess in my mind, that's really part of the whole conversation is, I know everybody's brought up infrastructure, but that's really this whole conversation is we're having is the developer is willing to pony up millions, literally millions, to put in water lines, secondary water, which is not served in this area, period, and put in a multi-million-dollar lift station and make all of that fly, plus all the roads, the storm drainage, and meeting all the codes that are necessary. And you know what I'm saying? Like, the infrastructure is the whole component of why this is even to the point, and we're still gonna leave RR1 and RR1, those will stay the same, except for they'll be serviced by sewer system, which currently is not okay generally. My understanding, we tried to do a subdivision years ago, and the city sent me a big, this was Sean's time before your time, but they sent me a big, long letter of how the septic systems basically are not sanitary sewers and blah, 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 and that it was a problem. And now, because that was in the county, now it's in the city, all of us are going to have to pay to put in a lift station to service the Freedom Farms at some point. It's just a matter of time. But what do we know about Harris Enterprises? None of these guys, the Andersons, Harris, they don't have anything in the works, do they?
No.
What if we change that to RR1 and we just left the parcel in the middle to allow enough to be able to fund all of these improvements in infrastructure?
Yeah, and yeah, in conversations with the Andersons, they are going through that wonderful paradigm where mom and dad didn't divvy up the land and the will very well, so now the siblings are all at odds of who gets to do what with what acreage.
But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
The R120 and the RR1 are not part of the bonus density
No.
PUD. Because see, technically, the R18 only allows multifamily in any regard only if they dedicate open space and they meet all the points that we did, I don't know, months ago.
Yeah, in the PUD.
So basically, they have to dedicate open space, which is what we wanted them to do. You know what I'm saying? To try to make it work so we can start carving out open space components.
And like when we say multifamily, it's not like it's going to be like big apartment buildings. Like it's like duplexes or a couple townhouses. Like
So what you would do is, if you were to approve this zoning, that would establish a base density. The base density is the number of units you get in an R18 zoning district. And that's a very simple math type equation. Then under a PUD, you take that base density, which is X number of units, and then if they put in open space and they give other amenities, they get considerations for that up to what?
It's basically, yeah, 50% increase.
From the state?
X,
No, it's from our PUD ordinance.
Okay.
X plus 50% of X. So if it was,
1.5x.
yeah, whatever that is. Yeah. But I just wanted to say, and forgive me for interrupting, but there are really two major considerations that you should be thinking about. Is first off, what is the highest and best use of this land? What is that? Is it, like has been said, is it 1 acre lots? Is it something higher density than that? That's for you guys to think about. What is the highest and best use of this land? The next question you have, and that includes the infrastructure and other things that the developer would bring to the table. The next question you would ask, and it's actually two questions, is this the right time and is this the right place for those things? If this is the right time and this is the right place, then the answer is pretty clear. If it's not, then the answer is also pretty clear. It's a nuanced question and it's very subjective, and broad discretion is given to planning commissions and city councils in making these kinds of decisions. And when I say broad discretion, what I mean is you don't have to have a whole lot of evidence to say you should or shouldn't vote one way or the other. You just have to say, you know what, this doesn't meet the general plan. That's a perfect answer. This is not the right time or place. Perfect. Those are reasonable person tests. That's what it's called. Is if a reasonable person would look at the conversation and the situation and come to the same conclusion, that's good enough. And that will hold up in court, and that's a valid decision. So again, just to reiterate, what is the highest and best use of this land? That's, again, very subjective, and that's for you guys to determine. And then is this the right time and is this the right place for this kind of zoning? Those are your questions.
I have a couple questions as well.
Sure.
So how would a watershed tiles, is that how you pronounce, is that what you're talking
He's
about?
talking about the
Drainage tiles.
drain tiles.
Drainage tiles? How are those affected by septic tanks?
The sewer's going to go in them and drain to the river, which is what happened in Elwood, which is why Elwood put in the sewer system to accommodate not putting E. coli into the rivers point blank,
Okay,
Well,
technically.
so,
But and let's go through that because we need to talk about the tile drains because I know how they've been treated in my world, but I guess if you want to explain it from a code perspective.
the one thing, the city engineer has maps of where we believe the drainage tiles are, and we normally talk about them at least once during the review approval and we have design standards to repair or reroute them if construction goes through them. Because that, like, actual construction observation is kind of where my responsibilities fade and go into public works and the city engineer. I haven't personally seen any of that be done or reworked, but I do know we have guidelines, and it's something that our city engineer is aware of as we get these reviews. So I feel the one struggle, having seen copies of the maps, is that I feel like they illustrate the spirit of the infrastructure, but in no way are they labeled well enough to show with exactness where they are.
Right. Well, in my understanding, the way we've done it in the past and the development side, if you're excavating and you find a tile line, basically you've got to reroute it in solid pipe around whatever it is you're doing so that they stay intact and continue draining.
Tile line, like what does it look like underground?
It's like a clay, it's like an open face where it has holes in it, so
Okay,
the
okay,
water will,
okay.
essentially make its way to it, and then it goes to a river or a body of
That
water
makes much more
somewhere
sense.
nearby.
I'm like literally picturing like broken tiles in the ground, and I'm like, that does not make sense to me.
They're not intended to be used as like a storm drain system. They're more to take the sheet flow from irrigation and keep it from building up salinity in the soil itself. So it has a place for the salt water to leach out and off.
That makes sense.
But along with that, so like we have them all down through our downtown right now, and they currently function under the homes that are currently here. Like there's a big one right on the corner, right by the propane, used to be the propane company where and it drains all of basically Harris subdivision and then drains down underneath all the homes in Melody Park. No, not Melody Park. What's that one called?
Where all these names
It's right next to Chavez Estates. What's that one called? Sandalwood. It goes right under Sandalwood and then drains eventually to the river. So I mean, we need to maintain them, and they need to stay maintained, and that's really part of the engineer's job, is to say, okay, hey, where are they? Here's where they generally are, and if you find them, then you've got to reroute them and make it so that they continue, because there's probably draining 2 miles above it. Who knows, depending on where the line starts and where it ends, but. So in my mind, that's really an engineering component that they've got to make sure. But the good news is they're going to also have to do storm drainage on top of keeping those drains in place. Like they've got to actually prove that they can keep their water on site, or they've got to detain it to a nearby body to make sure that it doesn't flood onto a neighbor. Which currently doesn't have. Right now, every one of those floods onto a neighbor as you head south. And then the roads become dams, you know what I mean? It just because of the way the drainage works in our area, but
One question.
Yeah, what other questions did you have?
What would change for the lift station with fewer households?
Cost goes up.
Cost goes,
Well,
The
didn't we
cost
say,
per household goes up. You're
right, but as
not-
far as the capacity requirement,
You might, because it's a regional one, that probably just changes what pumps you would put in. I don't think it's gonna change much in terms of the electronic system, the generator, even the pipe size, or the.
volume doesn't change with fewer households.
No. I
But it
mean,
will change though, because what'll happen is the city will have to pay more of it.
Yeah.
Because if the developer has less units and the city wants to put in a regional facility
Right.
that's going to eventually
Right.
drain this someday, then the
But
city.
removing the cost, I'm just thinking of logistics, the actual
Physically do it.
physics of it, because we're talking about lift station and moving, water from multiple houses. And it's like, what if there were two houses?
well,
I mean, you need the lift station because it doesn't run downhill
Yeah.
so.
or uphill, rather. But so regardless of, I'm just trying to, process this out loud. We're going to need the lift station if this has any houses on city utilities at all.
No, we already need it for Freedom Farm.
Well, okay, but
And
yes.
we're talking, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably 500 to $1 million just for a station, just for Freedom Farms.
Oh, easy, like.
I mean,
haven't
that
designed-
we're going to have to pay for
I
one way or
haven't
the other.
designed it. So the two lift stations I designed most from start to finish was one in St. Charles that we had to rip out and replace the existing one with a bigger one because there was a subdivision coming in, and one of the requirements that the city of St. Charles had is you're gonna build us a new lift station. So even with that one, the only thing that really changed is we added St. Charles, we took what St. Charles' existing flows, we hoped they were accurate, and what the subdivision was gonna put on top of that. And really, the only thing that changed was we made the vault size 2 feet wider and then added the same pumps. So that's adding an entire new subdivision plus the existing St. Charles, and this was not a.
Use the
dense
same pumps.
Yeah, we used the same pumps, it just needed to be a little bit bigger to handle the
Inflow.
Now, the other one I did was a regional one for Providence City along near the Blacksmith Fork River in 1700 South. That one, because it was very, kind of like this, a very regional one, we ended up designing, I think we stated a 12-foot vault diameter. And then we ended up showing that they would start with 2 pumps, but then we installed where the third pump would go in the future so that eventually you get to the point that you need that. Right now, what you'd say is with this pump is you would have 1 pump running and 1 for redundancy, and eventually then Providence City could expand that to have 3 pumps that would alternate, and that third one is in there for a redundancy factor. And so that's really all that changes is the fact that, and not to sound too rude, that's a pretty low cost compared to the generator and the electrical source and the vaults and the fittings and the pipe. That all has to go in anyway, one way, whether you're serving 22 houses or if you're serving 400 houses, that all has to go in pretty much the same. You just then kind of start playing with the diameter of the wet vault and your number of pumps. But when you're talking about almost a mile worth of force main line.
Yeah.
even if we didn't do this right now, the city would still have to pay that money for that lift station?
Well, that's
Unless some other developer were willing to do it in the
that
process of their own.
The way we've
development.
negotiated is that this would be enough density that the city doesn't have to pay as much or very much at all for the improvements that are going through here. And so, to me, looking at this, that's where the economics, I think, makes more sense for the city, is we've got a lot of capital improvements to put in, as we've heard in the public comments. And so granting a little bit more density in an area helps with the affordability helps the developer take on the risk of the development and the infrastructure, and the city gets rewarded with the infrastructure put in without having to put as much down ourselves. Because we've got a lot to go, we've got a lot of other needs in the city to go put our capital savings towards.
Can we talk about that one sec? Somebody mentioned the infrastructure needs to drive the development. Where did I write it down?
First person.
Yeah, the first person. But have you ever seen that really happen? I mean, have you ever seen a city go and put in the infrastructure that's sufficient for a proposed development?
No, because
They don't want to pay for it, probably.
I was speaking of a city that apparently doesn't have good infrastructure. We were doing a water master plan for Harriman, and we were just sizing and showing where they would need new tanks and kind of what the pressure zones were going to be and rating it out that way. But no one working at Harriman City 7-8 years ago had any idea still what the city's going to look like as it goes from pretty much Harriman High School to Copperton. So we were designing and just showing generally what main line sizes would need to be, what tank sizes would need to be, what their pressure zone rate, the different zones as they started climbing up the hills were looking like. And that is as much as I think a city drives infrastructure, is just showing that they've planned and what they feel that needs to be sized in areas as the development comes. And that way, when, like with the transportation master plan, when developers come in and say, okay, we want to do this, we've got a plan that says, great, this is the road size we're anticipating to need here in the future, so can you dedicate the right-of-way to us so when the time comes, we can build the road out without having to go out and do either eminent domain or frontage dedication, which, slows down a roadway project real quick.
How much do you estimate the infrastructure improvements that are going to be developer paid in this proposal? Like just an idea, not like we're going to guarantee a number. Just an idea, because I don't have any idea. I just want to know, I guess, like developer paid, the city, doesn't have to pay. This is an idea based on what you know from an engineer standpoint.
You say that infrastructure costs are about between $20,000 and $30,000 a lot?
Oh, no. Well, that's for what's on site. I think Mike is asking about the improvements they're doing off-site.
Yeah, I'm talking, the water lines, secondary water, sewer, storm drain, improving roads, all the stuff, the infrastructure that we need to support this kind of a project that the developer is going to have to pay, that they've offered, I guess, essentially to pay for us.
8 to 10 million.
And that's basically just developing the blue piece or whatever color that is. Is that blue? Purple?
Periwinkle.
Periwinkle. The periwinkle piece.
So
It's a great color.
yeah, I would guess in the $8 to $10 million range worth of offsite improvements. And that, because earliest they could start's probably, now that we've gone through this, earliest they could start's probably next fall. You could start doing some of the trenching and stuff to put the utility lines in. But with how volatile costs have been right now, it could become a lot different by the time they come around to it.
I have another question.
Uh-huh.
So this piece is what's being annexed, right?
Yeah, so this was all.
Everything's done,
It is
annexing.
annexed, yes. Okay, so in the future, I've had people ask me, say that they want to have more sales tax here in Tremont and the city's going to grow and all these things. What else does the city see going in here? Obviously there's going to be manufacturing a little bit closer to the highway. What else, are you thinking movie theaters or soccer facilities, or is there any in the future where are those things going to go in Tremont?
That's a great question.
And is
So
that what this infrastructure would?
Can I piggyback on that with another question? Because one of my other ones was about the transit corridors, the different collector roads and how they align with the current, with this one. I'm looking at the map and I was like, I think we're outside of where those run through,
So
but
the integrated land use plan and, I mean, to give you a timetable, the planning commission reviewed and adopted the integrated land use plan my first and second meetings on planning commission. It's 170 something pages, so it actually shows this area as industrial because it's along Iowa String and it's had the plant. But what we know now, even since the integrated land use plan was adopted a few years ago, is that an area that we thought was going to be, commercial and residential over by the I-84 interchange has now been adopted by the state as industrial. And so, this is a baptism by fire for, the city and the planning commission for what happens when, development comes and maybe changes what the timeline looks like. So, in terms of commercial, I think, personally, I think this is an area that some commercial could work. I just don't think it's gonna be on these. I don't think it's gonna be for a long, long time because you're gonna have to there's so much commercial space along Main Street and over by, the McDonald's 2300 West. There's so much commercial land still available in the city to be built out. I don't think it's gonna come out this way for a while, but with the roadway alignments we've adopted in the transportation master plan, I think there are spaces out along this area, especially around the industrial, the inland port, that commercial could work and thrive a little bit better, knowing that they're gonna get some better traffic flow, but.
What about like schools? Is there like, is the school looking more up there?
I've been trying to create a better relationship with the school district, but the only thing I've heard from them on property that they're looking to develop soon is the piece,
River Valley.
well, yeah, over in River Valley, the like 30 something acres. So,
I don't think it's that big. Isn't it like 15?
oh yeah, sorry,
12 to
it's
15?
yeah. So it's
Which they bought, so the school district already bought that dirt, 10 years ago, and all of their economic predictions are we're going to have declining enrollment, and that has so far been the case. Like, last year, my understanding was we had less students.
Yeah, North Park, my kids are in dual and they have 30 kids in their class. The rest of the kids in their grades only have 15 kids in their classes.
Yeah.
So
and
there's a lot of classes, but they're small class sizes.
Right. And I guess that's part of the vision, though. Part of the issue is this. The school district, the school district has lost kids this year. And the graduating class going out is larger than the kindergarten class coming in, my understanding. That's why they never built the school back then. And they've already bought the dirt, so they're already going to do it eventually. But the school district is a business. I mean, whether we have no kids or we have less kids, they're going to keep those class sizes full. The schools are going to be full because that's the efficient way to do it. We're not going to have 200 kids in a school because it's not efficient, But
I just didn't know if the school owned any property out there. Because,
Oh.
Looking
Not
at
that
it
I've
of like,
seen.
oh, it's high density housing, but if the school goes across the street or down 3 blocks, then that wouldn't seem as, does that make sense? Like, it doesn't seem as rural at that point. So I'm just
Yeah.
trying to look at like the long-term plan of this, of like,
Lindsay, can you pull up the integrated land use plan on page 103? And not right this second, but I just wanted to talk through it because back to Bill's question, we need to identify the highest and best use of the property because that's really what's going to come down
and
to
that's where
what
I'm
we
looking
should
at too,
do.
like,
And we planned all this out. I don't know if you guys remember this, but
I do.
you do. Yeah, we planned it all out, and all of it is included in that plan except
on
for the R120 piece.
You're on 103?
Yeah, I'm on page 103.
is it just the full?
It shows the current and the proposed plan essentially on a map so you can see it. But all of the property is included in the plan except for the R120 piece because they didn't quite go that far in the master plan. But basically, the piece on the left is
There's a whole page up in
is- what is
22.
low to medium density, so 7 to 10 units the acre. The the bulk of it is zoned or we were proposing industrial use for the R18 piece, and the RR1 piece was industrial.
I think you're on page 22 for the future land use as well, or 16, page 16
Is it
and
the same
17.
on that?
It's just a bigger,
Oh, a bigger map.
this one's the long term.
I don't know.
and the
Okay,
shorter
page 16,
term.
you say? I was looking at a smaller map, but I can zoom in on it, so it's fine.
I didn't know what the one underneath was on that 10.
Okay, 17. Yeah, page 17. Yeah.
I think 16 is more short-term future, and then 16 short-term future, 17 is like long-term.
Yeah, or the long term. Yeah.
I feel like I'm not on the right page.
Page 16, and it's page 16 of this.
Oh, of that. Okay.
Yeah, not of the
Pull it up,
document, but if
but-
you go down just a little bit.
That's what I was talking about, those corridors, because there's just part of this.
That's
Yeah,
page
so
16.
this is the
Okay.
this is the near term, and then the one below it is what the vision of the long term was this one.
Come for a second.
Bottom.
So we're 23 on if we're on the toggle part at the bottom.
I just don't have it.
Oh yeah, yeah. One more page. Yep, right there. Go down just a smidge more.
There you go.
There you go. So really, I guess this is what would plan before, and I think the light purple is industrial. And yeah, this is the long-term vision of what we're setting the foundation for now,
So that's
essentially.
the infrastructure that we're planning on putting in there. Right?
Well, if we did it, so this was the plan as far as what we were proposing to do. I mean, in my mind, from a city impact scenario, I think this is much more intrusive and is much harder on the agricultural component than what the developer is proposing.
Yeah.
Just my gut. I mean, if we put industrial and commercial, it's proposing a commercial center in that dark red and have the road that
Killing me.
follows the road that follows the freeway up to Equals, basically, which I don't know if we know where we're at with the inland port. Has there been, I've heard scuttlebutt of there been companies been sniffing around, but I don't know that we're really too far from this kind of a proposal with all the infrastructure, the PID and things that the state has put in place. But I mean, really, I guess this is what we had planned originally. And I don't know what you feel like, but I mean, really, from a highest and best use, this is it, in my mind. I mean, industrial and commercial, close to town, close to the freeway, that's the highest and best use of this property, for me. I don't know what you guys feel.
I wasn't here for the conversation surrounding when this was put together
Sure.
and the public input process that gathered.
We only worked on it for like 4 years.
Well, that's the question is, how did that conversation go? Because obviously,
It was COVID.
the current temperature in this particular room is, please don't do this. But at some point, some group of people decided this was the way to go. And so I'm interested in the disparity and the disconnect there, because it's.
Well, I think when we originally talked, the vision was we have basically no place for industrial. Everything has really been developed or is not being sold. It won't be sold, like they don't want to sell it. And so the vision was it's got to be close to town, and we probably should put it close to the freeway just to minimize the impact on the existing residential users. And that's why it made sense to do on this corridor, and why they put it on the Sure sites or whatever that then triggered the inland port and all those things, you know what I mean?
But you had conversations with the public about
Oh,
this
yeah.
particular plan.
Yeah,
It
they
was
had many.
presented.
Did we?
They had many.
It was years ago. Like,
Yeah,
it wasn't right now.
And there was a survey that said everyone, the majority, 80 to 90% wanted to keep it rural and preserve open space.
We can go back. I mean, there was tons of open houses and all sorts of stuff that they did, but it
And that's not what the key priority that.
doesn't even really matter. It doesn't matter. The vision is the highest and best use. It does matter. Got to narrow down.
Doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter what we did back then.
It
I mean,
does.
come on, we already did it all. But if you're gonna scream, we'll have officer remove you if you're gonna chime up in the meeting. We're trying to have a conversation.
Yeah, right.
As the planning commission, we're responsible for looking at the city's things that we have, the codes and the ordinances and things, and then proposing for the city council what we feel like would be the best.
Yeah, we knew that
This is
this.
the right time, and if this is the right,
This
place?
document is intended to be an aspirational document. The idea of something that will take 20 to 50 years.
Yeah, 50
to
years.
implement
Yeah.
is 100% correct. However, decisions that we make now influence the direction that goes for the next 20 years and beyond. So we just need to be careful about how we handle these kinds of things. If the decision was to, we don't want residential actually in this area, we want industrial, this gives you enough legal ammunition to say, we didn't make this decision in a vacuum. It's reasonable that we denied this because what we hope for is industrial. And if someone came in with an industrial proposal, then you would say yes, because it follows the land use plan as adopted. If, however, you wanted to do something different, you would have to come up with a different reason to support that.
Yeah.
Which is totally okay. I mean, again, very broad discretion is given to you guys to make these decisions.
Yeah, well, this was just a planning document, essentially. It wasn't necessarily meant to drive anything, just as a planning document.
but it makes sense for me, because that's something that I've struggled with, is looking at like, okay, as my kids grow up, like they're gonna want to play indoor soccer in the winter, and we're not gonna want to drive to Logan every single day of the week. And so where will that be in Tremont? Or will it not be in Tremont at all? Will we lose that tax in Tremont and it'll go somewhere else? And so this helps me to understand, like, okay, this is kind of the goal of where in 10 years things will be going, and then where we should be focusing infrastructure.
There should be a discussion revolving some of these topics. Like I think everyone in Tremont has discussed transit. Everyone has discussed how do we get across town. I mean, legitimately, that is a concern. And Main Street, as it sits, is not an adequate throughput. It just isn't. You cannot get through Main Street with increased population, and hardly with what we have. So, like, maybe we do lean on this a little bit, and we say, look, we want to focus all our eggs or all our attention on somehow getting across town, and we follow our output or
The diagonal line.
yeah, like get a parallel to the freeway and let's get across town, you know, and we say, like, this is what we committed to do because we're feeling it now, and we're talking about infrastructure, right? Everybody talks about infrastructure and how we hope that these roads and our capacities and our flow and everything can be, that will be good and utilized, effective. I mean, that's, I don't necessarily like it in the context of this conversation, because my opinion about this particular, you know, this subject, the LB land, you know, kind of, you know, for better or worse, like to me, it's a procedural problem that's brought us to this point, and how we started this conversation with them. I think we've pigeonholed them as a city. I think we've kind of made it almost an impossible situation for them. Maybe not, it's not on purpose, but they've reached a point now where promises were made, discussions were had, and they committed to do things a certain way because we told them that we could. And
Yeah, but we
would.
didn't tell them anything. We don't have to do anything.
Well,
technically.
us as a commission, no.
Right.
But in the planning process, or in the process of them coming and saying, "Hey, what is possible? What can I do here?" and somewhere along the line, the city agreed or said, "Hey, if you do this, we will make sure that this happens."
Well, let's-
and that is not a good position for the city or for LB Land and Land Holdings. I think we've
Let's talk about that, though.
screwed the
So-
pooch a little.
Well, but I don't think, Jeff, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anything has necessarily been guaranteed to the developer at this point, correct?
It's not
No,
our role. It's
no.
just- it's
All they
not our-
did was try to figure out a way
Right.
to fund the infrastructure. Because the biggest issue, if you look at this map,
When was this piece purchased?
which piece? The LB land piece, I don't know, 6 months ago or more.
All of it together?
Developer
one
buys
piece.
a piece of land, the developer buys it at risk, knowing that if it's not.
I
zoned the way it
understand.
needs to go-
I understand that the reality is that they take the risk.
Right.
But if they have any reason to take that risk, like if there's a wink wink or a nod nod, and they say, oh, okay, well the city's on my team. I'm going to go in on this, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go buy this other property because the whole long term of this is we're going to put in this lift station. And I agree to that. I would love to do that. Speaking as the developer in this case, I'll try to visit with as many people as I can and try to make this happen to my best interest and to the city's best interest. But there's been nothing actually done. And so he's actually been out and bought things with real money, with an expectation, and now we're saying, no, sorry. Like, you shouldn't have listened to us, the city, telling you it was going to happen this and this way.
Yeah.
You life lesson. It's like, I don't find that moral. I don't find that ethical. I think it's, but that's not, that's kind of a side conversation. The reality exists is that, yes, there are infrastructure problems, and we know part of those infrastructure problems has to do with how we move across town. It has to do with how water is handled. We know that septic tanks, like what if adding houses here at all is a terrible idea? Just period. And we say if we're going to be a city and we're going to map it out the way we want it to look 50 years from now, rather than what the opportunity is right in front of our face, we say, you know what? This is the best place for a Panda Express or a strip mall. It kind of sucks I don't know. Sounds like people in here and in other conversations would rather it be rural and residential. But how do you balance the future need again for the actual problems that exist today without making some sort of sacrifice today?
And I think also including the people who aren't in this room, right? There are people who do need houses in Utah. And so as a planning commission, we need to try and get more people houses, get our houses for our kids and our.
And I'll tell you,
family that wants to-
R18, this is another thing, in my opinion, R18 is where I live. And in my ward, my neighborhood, I'll bet there are 5 different engineers. Like, these aren't the at-risk community type. We're not talking, drug dealers and meth users.
R18 is still
Like,
at least
R18
$50,000 or $500,000.
enough for me to hesitate to how to put in my sprinkler system because like I'm sick of dragging water hoses. Like I don't know what the expectations are there, but basically I'm for those reasons I'm in favor of it. I'm in favor of doing it because I think we put the guy in a very, very bad situation. And if it was my money, and if it was my handshake and my interaction with the city, I would want the exact same treatment. I would want them to pony up. That being said,
Are you making a motion?
I wasn't quite done with my questions, but
Yeah, keep going. That's
basically,
fine. We haven't heard from Mark either. He hasn't said anything over there. Is Brett on the thing? Okay, maybe we can open it up to him and have him have a chat too. What do you want to?
the other, well, my other questions, I think it kind of, because we've talked about speed limits and we've had that conversation and what part of the process that is. What part of the process does that conversation happen.
As far as speed limits go?
Yeah.
There would be a traffic impact analysis that would be done that would determine the size and of roads and other treatments that need to be done, including infrastructure and
Turn lanes and everything.
intersections and signals, if any, that need to be put in, four-way stops, any of those kinds of things would be discussed as determined by the number of overall units, car trips per day, and the impact on the local roads. We'd look at that. And the idea would be to keep the level of service on the existing roads at the current level. So, again, a minimal impact.
Or within the acceptable level, I guess.
So I got one more thing to say. So on the flip side, say we don't do this at all, and we end up paying for it.
We have to do something.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It has to be
If we don't
zoned.
zone this, the way that the developer needs to do it,
Right.
and we as taxpayers pay for that, for what needs to happen with the lift station. How many people are going to come to that meeting? As far as being really, really upset. Now, I'm okay with people being upset with us paying for it, but I would want us to all be on the same page as a community to want to go that direction. Does that make sense? Like, if we're all deciding that this preservation is worth it for all of us.
But it's a good point because it doesn't just impact property tax values, but it affects how much you pay for water and sewer throughout town. And everyone would be on the hook for that. And it's expensive.
So like
It's not just a matter of.
our sewer.
All of our
like,
taxes.
That's right.
Rate would go up
Everything increase
because the city would have to pay for this lift station.
And we're
Potentially.
covering that cost for them, you know, because it's got to come from somewhere.
Well, I think part of it was this was done, in my mind, it was done wrongly back then, that we should have allowed them or made them come into the city and we should have avoided these problems. But, and by annexing them now and basically working this infrastructure out now, we're avoiding a future Freedom Farm disaster. Because Freedom Farms is, in my mind, from a sewer perspective, is a disaster. And if we keep going, because of the the tile lines and the water, what is it? It's pretty clay in this area. So it just doesn't drain like it should. And so putting more septics there from a county perspective is a disaster in my mind, which is why we kind of, I guess the city annexed it in and is trying to solve the Freedom Farm problem at the expense of the developer getting some zoning and providing open space as a component per the PUD, you know?
I really liked I like that idea though, Karen, that like we are trying to listen to you and we really are listening to your concerns and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we as a commission are going to agree with everything you say or agree with that is what's best for Tremonton based on our other conversations that we're having outside of this room. And so I know that it can feel very frustrating to feel like we're not listening to you or like we're not, we've had these public comments and things that have been said and we're not listening, but we really are trying to balance that with the other conversations that we're having outside of this room and what we feel like is best. I mean, we are all just volunteers up here choosing to volunteer our time and like doing this. And so I think it's a really good point that like we can either have some people frustrated with us now or we can have a ton of people really frustrated with us later when our taxes and all of our stuff goes up because we have to pay for this lift station because we're not working with the developer to help.
And we need to be honest about what has already happened. And that's unfortunate, and it's not a good position for any of us to be in. And I just came into this situation wanting to make it better, and it's really hard to be faced with previous decisions that I had nothing to do with, that we have to mitigate and we have to face, because the less we face it, the worse it's gonna get. And I mean, I can criticize Jeff about his Harriman development, but maybe there's, you know, and that's the thing, having the foresight of the gigantic plan is what we all hoped would happen. But with Draper, with Harriman, we didn't see that growth coming. We are all trying to envision it, hoping that we can do the best that we can, but doing nothing is not gonna help either. So, and I don't enjoy the taxes having gone up since I've moved here. It's really frustrating to me. But now that I really understand that there's so many nuances to the city and to county and to the growth and the stuff that needs to be done, it's a rock and a hard place. So that's what I would say. I don't know if we can take
These are those
questions.
4 lots on the right. See
Those
the
are.
red ones?
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I
so
thought.
this whole property is included, everything except for the R120 component.
No, I think even the R120, because you can see,
No, because, oh, does it include that piece? Oh, it does include that piece.
Is this the,
This is the top piece because of the 4 dots, the 4 lots.
Oh.
And this that is the R120 piece. So the whole thing is in the plan, actually. I thought this was this piece. Because see the square out of it?
It would make sense that it went all the way to our annexation boundary.
Yeah.
so,
Well, and that's why if you can go back to that other map, it's really important to look, if you can zoom out. So from a city, when the plan was done originally, if you look at the city from our growth potential, essentially this will become the center of the city eventually, because we can't grow to the south because of Elwood, we can't grow to the north because of Garland. The only way we can grow is to the west. And that's why this infrastructure is so critical, because right now nothing has really crossed the freeway because nobody has been willing to pony up the 10 million to get across the freeway.
which would
Do you know what I'm
include,
saying?
but let's say, so now let's talk about industrial and the process of getting an industrial investor to sign off on something like that. I mean, what scale of an industrial project would that require to make that pencil?
Well, I mean,
If we're talking $10 million of infrastructure,
well,
and then what, are we negotiating with another, maybe not, for lack of a better, Procter and Gamble or like Walmart at that point? And then they're gonna require they're gonna want tax leniency,
maybe.
right?
Who knows?
So we may even be paying for this down the road if it's industrial,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, this kind of sucks.
Well, I think if you
The
look,
station scenario is a really, really attractive component.
yeah. Well, the hard part for me, if I live there, I think the industrial in this plan is much, much more intrusive, and I would much rather have some RR1, some R120, and maybe one part of it that would still allow some smaller lots in a rural application, but the bulk of it is still rural, and the average is still 2 to 3 lots per acre, if I did my math correctly. Even if they use the PUD zone on the one parcel. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the bulk of the acreage is still going to be rural and is not going to be commercial or industrial.
Where did you say the school property was that they purchased?
It's up, see the blue piece? It's like,
The blue lines?
no, the blue, see the B and then the brown, the multi-use, and then there's a blue component right in the middle of that yellow. See
Oh, I see you're talking.
what I'm
Okay,
talking
yeah,
about?
By the West Canal or the,
yeah, right
The
there.
light,
Right there.
gray.
That's it.
Okay.
That's the school piece, yeah. But really, the whole component is we're having less kids per household. And so even as we grow households, we don't necessarily grow students, is what their economic numbers are saying. That we might double in population and not increase kids, is what they're proposing. That's why they never built it, because they bought it and then they got the numbers back and they said, oh crap, we're going down in students, not up, even though our population is increasing.
that's opening with Salt Lake County.
Yeah. And so based on that, I mean, we had declining enrollment. I mean, I know the schools, everybody's talking about schools and bus stops and all of
My
this.
nursery is the largest nursery in the state, so that's.
Okay, we are also the
We've
young and
got
fun
tons
ones,
of
so-
kids.
So let's talk about who's homeschooling, because we are the
half our ward.
the largest
That's our ward, that's
homeschooling.
true, that's true.
Well, in the charter schools and all that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
And I think
we'll
it,
see.
one aspect of the school is that like North Park is not safe. Like it is not safe if there's an earthquake kind of thing. And that is part of the school issue too, is that not only are we having a lot of portables and things like that, but it's not reinforced. There's not air conditioning. There's not those kind of things. And that is another issue with some of the school stuff too, that people are looking at.
Well, so it depends on who you believe and what you've seen. Let me just tell you. So I bought the Garland School, and they told me that too, and it's definitely reinforced. My grandma requested the plans from the middle school that they said wasn't reinforced, and it's definitely reinforced.
I mean,
So
for it to
there-
last so many years, it has to be at least somewhat reinforced, but
Well, yeah, so you have to be careful who you believe, because the component is they want it to feel like it's falling down so they can justify raising our taxes $220 million worth to justify a new school, so.
just
I'm
like
just saying.
classroom, just like having extra portables and things like that, because we have dual immersion classes in there that we have to have more room for these bigger classes, but the other kids in our grades do not have that big of classes.
Right,
And so it seems like it's a really full school, but they just have to have a lot of classrooms
right.
with not as many kids in them.
Monica, can I make
We're-
a comment that answers one of his questions?
We're not gonna open up the
Let's talk.
public right now, but let's
We'll talk
we can
after.
talk after.
For
You
sure.
got in trouble last time, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Mark, you haven't said anything. We need to hear from you.
I'm just trying to absorb,
the
I'm absorbing all this.
experienced member of the city.
Yes.
Tell us your thoughts, your vision.
I understand. I came from a large city. I grew up in Colorado. I started in Greeley, Colorado, which was a small town, but it had a university. It's grown exponentially. I moved to Colorado Springs. My street, when I grew up, was 3 streets over. You could go out and play in the grass. Now you got to go 20 miles or plus to get outside the city limits. But I've seen what has come with that growth. Colorado Springs is probably one of the most popular cities to live in. They have a lot of good infrastructure that, yes, things are, sometimes a mess on all the roads there too. But they have brought in a lot of good quality businesses, industry that kept people there instead of having to go somewhere south, north, east, west. I work with our fire department. Yesterday, I went to Procter & Gamble on a person that had a medical issue. He drives 2 hours south of us here to come to work at Procter & Gamble. Can you imagine, that's every day. So 4 to 6 hours of driving, depending on road conditions, weather conditions, to be able to make a decent living. If he can move up to here, how much money would he save just in fuel and car expense, wear and tear? So, yes, I know it sucks to be, we want to stay rural, we want to stay a small town, but we want what is best for all of us to be able to have the amenities that everybody's asking for. I've had people say, well, why don't we have a Walmart? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? Well, until we get that infrastructure put in here, we can't ask for all the fun stuff, like the movie theaters and things like that. We need to have that. We need to have certain things in place before those people, those companies come in and want to be part of our community, to make our community better. So I know we're between a rock and a hard place, but I think growth is it's going to happen one way or another, whether we like it or not, but it's.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions? Have we answered all of have we gone through everything you guys had?
I think
Other comments? Do we want to open it up to Brett? Does Brett want to say anything? If he,
Of course I do.
okay, let's hear you. Let's hear it, Brett. What do you got? Anything?
Okay, I got a couple things. I'm a little concerned about Rulin's comments about unethical. We need to keep that language out of our commission. There's nothing unethical that's taking place. So that I'm a little frustrated with that kind of language. If deals were made, there were no deals made with the developer. There was discussions made, but the developer knew what he was getting into, as the city did. So I think we just need to be a little careful with that. The next thing I want to mention is that Bill mentioned, is this the time and the place? And That's the big question. What is it we're really discussing out in this area? And in my mind, is this going to be a housing zone or is it going to be an industrial zone? And it sounds like the people that live out there and you guys and everyone talking about it, it's going to be a housing zone. So then it's a matter of what kind of housing, what kind of lot sizes do we want? And for some reason, we're letting R18 drive this whole discussion. Does it have to be that? Can it be R110? Are there some things that we can do? I think, Micah, you brought this up earlier. You know, can we reduce some of the R120s down to R110s to make it so that that area is feasible out there? I just don't know that we've really looked at the big picture on that area out there. And so that's my concern, is I don't want to feel like we're making a decision because our developer needs to pay for all the infrastructure. You know, we can work with our developer and we can work with the people and we can figure out a way, but we need to decide what's best for Tremont out in that area and not let the developer drive that. That's my opinion on it. Now, I'm not a voting person, so that's my opinion. And then I just want to say and tell Micah, thank you so much for all the years of service that you put in to help us on the planning commission. That's all.
Here, here.
Thanks, Brett. Any other comments? Bill, Jeff, do you have anything else we need to discuss before we decide what we're doing here?
No, I think we've talked about it.
Just one last thought maybe is that you are making a recommendation to the city council. So that will be the final decision will be made by the city council at some point in the future. We're going to look to do if the developer wants to do a PUD for the property, that will be a separate public hearing and there will be more legislative items and we'll do a development agreement that way as well. So more chances to discuss and fine tune this thing going forward, but just that's you guys are awesome. Thanks for all this discussion. It's been really, really good.
I would make a motion to recommend the rezoning to the city council
As proposed.
as proposed.
We have a motion. Second. Okay, we have a motion by Andrea. We have a second by Mark. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
No.
Yes, no, no,
Yes.
yes. I vote yes to break the tie. So motion passes. Moving on, discussion 5C, discussion consideration of 1.08 commercial and industrial zones.
I want to table.
You want to table this one and bring it back? Okay,
I'd like to go home and see my kids before they go to bed, so
I would
table.
entertain a motion to table if you guys so desire.
I move that we table 5C.
I have a table by Rollin.
I
A
will
motion to table by Rollin.
I'll second that.
Second by Andrea. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And Planning Commission reports. You guys have anything to bring up? I just had one small thing, Jeff. I asked the mayor about it, but I noticed in Holmgren Estates, the Holmgren East Estates, 3 doors north of Western Ag Credit, somehow missed their sidewalk 10 years ago. I was walking over there and I was like, what the heck? I wondered if we could twist an arm a little. So it's 3 doors north of Western Ag Credit on, what is
What do you mean
that?
they missed their sidewalk? Like
There's
isn't
no
a
sidewalk.
It's missing. It's just missing. And I'm like, what in the heck? Yeah, if you, if you zoom in, can you
There's
go
no
to the Google
sidewalk.
Earth? I didn't want to make a big deal of it. I just think somebody was responsible to put in the sidewalk, and I don't know who it was, but I've never noticed it until my kids were like, oh yeah, we walked over, there was like all these lumps and this like weeds in the sidewalk area. I was like, what?
The stuff like east of it.
What east of what? So it's 3 homes. The 3rd home east of Western Ag Credit doesn't have a sidewalk.
Just on the one side.
Yeah. It's just one house and
And they didn't like take out the sidewalk?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know what they did, but I was just thinking it would be ideal if we could encourage them to put in that small section of sidewalk.
Well, we still have some coverage.
Well, we really don't. That was 10 years ago when that was developed. But anyway, just
I can look into it.
a thought.
That's actually,
It's actually really funny.
well, that's,
Yeah, I don't know how it happened or why it happened and why I've driven by it 8,000 times and
I'm
I've
trying to
never.
figure out, like, have I never noticed that?
Yeah, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I just had one.
Oh, please.
The second meeting in July, I think it's the 23rd, will be canceled because I'm gonna be on a Harley going to Mount Rushmore, so I'm not gonna be on a phone call for that.
So the 22nd, is that it?
I think it's the 22nd or 23rd.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going to be out of the country.
Nice.
Well, you had to one-up me, Mark.
I am.
Are you going to be on a Harley?
No,
He hesitated.
jet plane.
For the
Yeah, the
record.
22nd, so we'll have them.
You'll send out the notice.
Anticipate having the meeting on the 8th, but the 22nd.
Swimming across the ocean.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn then.
I move to adjourn.
I have a motion by Roland,
Second by
second by Karen.
Karen.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
For the record, that house was built in 2017, so it was only 8 years ago,
Oh,
not 10 years
I'm
ago.
sorry.
Apparently,
It was-
according to
the
Google Maps
development was done 10
historical.
years ago,
Okay,
though.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2018.
Carries, we're adjourned. Thank you.
That's 32 ounces this time.
Congrats.
Sorry.
Your hair color looks
I have to
really
go
good
home.
with your skin right now.
Let the
Thank
table
you,
project
thank you.
go.
Good job
Oh,
on
wait.
Scratching them. No, just
tan, you know.
I know, tans still do a body good.